Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Mastering Cathodic Protection, Expert Guidance to Ensure Compliance and Protect Underground Tanks. Brought to you by LP Gas Magazine and our sponsor for the event, Mopeka. My name is Brian. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager here at LP Gas Magazine, and I will be your event manager for today's presentation. At this time, I'd like to get you comfortable with our console and the ways you can participate during today's presentation. Please notice the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your console. If you have a question, type it in the panel's text box and click Submit to place your question in the queue. We encourage you to ask and enter any questions you may have for our speakers during the presentation. If time allows, we will address these questions at the end of the presentation during our Q&A portion. Questions that were submitted during registration have already gone to our speaker and may be covered during the presentation. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's event, you may use the same Q&A panel on your screen to submit your issue, and our technical support specialist, Hallie, or myself will personally assist you. Now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Today, we will be hearing from John McCoy, who is the managing partner at McCoy, Leavitt, Laskey. We'll be hearing from Hans Schmoldt. He's the owner and corrosion engineer at Anode Systems Company. Our moderator for today is Kevin Jaffe from Mopeka Products. He is the COO at Mopeka. Frank Thompson. He's the founder of PT Risk Management, and Lauren Abbl, also of PT Risk Management. So at this time, I'd like to turn our presentation over to Kevin, our moderator for today's webinar. Kevin, take it away.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our discussion here on cathodic protection. We think this is a topic that is really relevant in today's world, especially with what marketers are seeing. And obviously the idea here is to bring some industry experts together to help enlighten and help train, help people understand what are the struggles with cathodic protection and how is the landscape changing as an industry as a whole. So what I'd like to do is let's go ahead and jump into the first question. So the question is, what are the top compliance challenges in cathodic protection, including failure indicators and overlooked safety precautions, and how can professionals ensure compliance? This is a great question. And John, I'd love for you to weigh in on this first if you could. John? John, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. That's better. I apologize. So thank you. The issues I see, having done this for about 40 years, is that we have installations that are already in service that we've taken over, and installations that perhaps are owned by someone else. And in both situations, the question is, when we have an installation that we've taken over or that we're maintaining, what are we doing to make sure that the cathodic protection is still operative and protecting the system, and the ability to have regular intervals of inspecting that are a problem that I see in industry when we have problems, is that someone is not inspecting it on a periodic basis. The issue with systems that we don't own is that often we're filling tanks where cathodic protection is in place, but we aren't monitoring that, and we defer to the person that owns the tank, and yet we have risk if an explosion occurs because that system has not been monitored. So we need to, those are the two areas where I see the biggest problem. Hans may have other ideas on this. I know he sees this on a regular basis in terms of inspecting and installing.
Yeah. John, now I do know we have some pictures here. I know you've been very close to, from a legal perspective, what's happened in the industry, and these were some pictures that we had talked about previously. Can you help us understand what's going on here?
Yeah, this is the genesis. This explosion involves the lack of cathodic protection at an explosion site in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, December 6, 2006. And on the right lower corner, you see the corrosion of that line underground. And on the left, to give you some dimension, at the lower right corner, you'll see a series of 6 or 7 fire engines. So that gives you an idea of the mass of this explosion. 300 gallons of propane escaped in the atmosphere. As you know, that expands 270 times. When it's in atmosphere, it killed 3 people, injured 76 people, caused over $100 million in damage. And as a result, this occurred because a multi-billion-dollar company did not test their cathodic protection, and it obviously had failed. And as a result of this, industry, along with PERC and MPGA, worked with Hans to develop a protocol for how to understand cathodic protection and develop systems for installation and maintenance.
So I think the key takeaway there also is the fact that everything that we're seeing here could have been avoided, right?
Absolutely. It was, as I say, a $500 test every 3 years. Had that been done, this event would not have occurred.
Sure. Hans, I'd like to throw it over to you. I know you've been really close to the industry since day one. Talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on this.
Well, the biggest problem I run into is that people retire, they die of old age, they get out of the business, and there's a whole new set of new people that don't know what the older guys knew. So it's up to people like us to keep preaching the gospel, is what I call it. We have nice PERC manuals. We have these webinars. Propane associations have speakers. This is my biggest objective is to keep educating the new guys on what matters, taking these readings, documenting. That's the biggest issue I've got to deal with.
Hans, I got a question for you. Do you see in your line of work, and obviously you're training people, is there a big disconnect between people understanding what they're doing and understanding why they're doing it?
Well, they understand the need for it. They may be assigned the job of taking tank to soil potentials, but they don't understand what they mean. And that's my job, is to tell them why they matter. And if they don't know what's causing the problem, troubleshooting is something I've been doing for about 40 years, like John. It's second nature for us, but not for the newcomers.
Right. Now, you did share a picture with us, which we thought was interesting. Talk a little bit about what we're looking at here and why this was something you wanted to share.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I saw this last month down in Arizona. You've got a decent tank, but you've got corroded standpipe, the 2-inch riser. That's not able to be protected with an anode or cathodic protection. It's shielded by the dome or the shroud. The solution to that problem is for the marketer, before they bury the tank, is to take some tape, pipe coating tape, and wrap that riser before they bury the tank. It can be done at a factory, but it's more likely to be done before the installer installs the tank.
Okay. So, Lauren and Frank, do you guys have anything you want to add to this question?
You know, the problem, as you've brought up, is somebody was compliant to begin with, but now people have become very complacent. And when you take the position that we are servicing an owner's tank, and the tank owner is not willing to do anything that we're talking about, I'm sure we're going to address this also a little later in the broadcast. But, you know, you can't take a position as a propane marketer that it's somebody else's problem. The problem is and belongs, and it'll be right in your cabin if there is a problem. We also understand that this is a fairly new problem, burying tanks. And the problem, Hans had a chance to talk to me years and years ago and said, do you know anything about cathodic protection? And after he indoctrinated me, I was calling on an account in Utah, and I was just soliciting their insurance. And I mentioned the fact that, did he have any underground tanks? Because I thought I saw one in the yard. He said, I don't want to talk about it. I've had 7 underground tanks that I have installed fail this year. And I asked him, do you do anything with cathodic protection? And in those days, he said, no, I don't know. So some of this is the fact that not only do the new folks that are handling the company not know it, not understand it, but have that complacent thing that, hey, this is a problem for somebody else. And again, there are very few people out there outside of Hans that are married, if you to the fact that we need to protect our propane guy that's down the street and all over the United States, because any one claim that is caused by this is going to be felt by every propane company that is out there.
Sure.
These claims are killing us. We've got to get on this cathodic protection.
You know, that's a good point. The other thing, you know, we're talking about education and understanding, and just like as Hans is trying to train people to understand the whys and the risks, I'm sure the insurance, industry as a whole is also coming from that perspective, because once again, it's about mitigating risk. So I can see you guys part of that educational, pathway, but it's more organic.
Yeah, not only on the agent level, but even at the insurance carrier level, there are loss control experts that will come out and give classes to your guys on how to properly install and how to document and what kind of documentation that they'd like to see that's going to help in the event of a claim.
Sure.
Yeah, if I could comment on that. My experience is that in the industry, the failures, explosions are rare, but when they happen, as in the example that we just showed earlier, they're catastrophic. And they often could cause smaller companies to go out of business, lose the ability to get insurance, or the insurance premiums will be astronomical. I've had a client whose insurance premiums went up 1,000% from one year to the next as a result of the loss.
Wow.
And what we're talking about here is being proactive. That's often more difficult because you don't have the loss. And once you do have the loss, you find religion. And our goal here is to provide you that proactive analysis. And the systems we see is installs can be an issue, but the bigger issue is having an organized plan to find ways to check. And as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, the technology that is available to you to eliminate the need to do it on a semi-annual basis, but to do it almost in real time, because you're only able to determine the status of the cathodic protection if you're only testing every few years. That's the only time you can check it. The technology is available that will allow you to do that in real time, to be proactive. And I think that's part of the new age of where we're going here. It allows us to have technology that assists us, because the best way to avoid human error is to build in technology that provides us automatic testing for us.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to do our first poll here. So I'm going to throw it back over to Brian. Brian, please.
Thanks, Kevin. Our first poll question is, when are you performing your cathodic protection testing? And you can use your mouse or your mobile phone to select the answer. I'm going to give about 30 seconds for our listening audience to select their answer.
While we're waiting, I need to answer Levi's question that he posted a few minutes ago.
We're gonna actually hold on to that. We're gonna answer some questions at the end here.
Okay, I have about 45, or about 50% of our attendees have answered thus far. I'll give another 15 seconds, and then we'll get to the results on those.
While we're waiting, PEP, Shane asked a question. Tell me what PEP is.
PEP, Hans, is the new version of CTEP. It's the Propane Education Program, I think is what it stands for, but it's what CTEP has moved to.
Obviously, that's not me.
What we'll do here is while we're waiting, I will just remind everybody, we'll take Q&A toward the end here. Any questions that we're unable to get to in this broadcast, we will turn around and with the panel of experts, get back to you within 48 hours.
Excellent. Okay, we've leveled off about 60% of our attendees have answered our poll questions, so we'll get to the poll results.
Okay.
So about 54% have said summer. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was about to say these are interesting, interesting stuff here. It falls in line with what we've seen from an industry, at least from our side here. Spring and summer, there are advantages and disadvantages, and obviously there's other geographics at play depending on where you are. If you have a harsh winter or you have mild winters, so but this kind of falls in line with what we would expect to see a little bit by and large. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump into our next question here. So this question, what role could technology have in cathodic protection? Example, remote monitoring, diagnostics, alarms, escalation points, safety, compliance, etc. I'm going to start this off with John. John, please.
Yeah, so I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but human error or failure to do things leads to the most mistakes. The reason I will always have work is that human beings continue to make mistakes. And technology, while not perfect, reduces the error rate of missing testing or missing going out and making sure the cathodic protection is active and properly installed. So if you have a reminder, let's say my understanding is, and I think Kevin can speak more to this, the remote monitoring that's available in the technology that Mopeka provides gives you automatic feedback rather than having to send a human being out there. That's huge. And it also can give you a checklist of things that you need to do to make sure the connections are in place. And these are things that provide you a leg up to your competitors. It's a service that you can charge the customer for. It also indicates that you're concerned about safety. So these technology is always something that if you have it available and it's of good quality, is something that reduces your error rate or chance of error, and is really a great development in safety monitoring. And I think others can speak to that as well.
Yeah, I would love to throw it over to Lauren. I'll touch a little bit base. I'll touch some base on the cathodic sentinel that Mopeka has, but just from a technology standpoint, I want to go to Lauren next on this. Lauren, please.
I think I'll echo what John said. I mean, the insurance companies are looking for hypervigilance, I guess is the word I should use here. And as humans, we can't always be. You're not testing every day. You're not testing even every month. You're probably following the 3-year protocol. This is going to give the insurance companies a little bit of a cushion to know that if the technology is detecting something on the daily or on the weekly, you've got a chance to get out there and then fix it and make the problem go away before the problem turns into those catastrophic losses. And that is going to help obviously save your bacon when something happens, but it's also going to help with the ratings for your insurance. If you've got something like that in place, it's like having cameras in your vehicles or some of the other risk management techniques that are out there. That's going to all play into the premium that you pay at the end of the year, which nobody likes.
Sure, sure. I think as our industry matures, we're looking to technology more and more to even the playing field, reduce risk, bring in more automation. I know AI has been a big buzzword in our industry. So hearing about new technology or asking from the industry for new technology should be a thing as a whole. Mopeka answered that call with our Cathodic Protection Sentinel. What that'll do is that gives the marketer peace of mind where you can have a unit in the ground giving you your voltage readings and your moisture readings, just as you would do your regular testing. But you'll also be able to get current on the tank and understand what's really going on underground. And then the real added thing there, and I liked your term, Warren, about being hyper vigilant. Right now, per code, we test it when it goes in the ground. We test it 8 months later. Then we go into a 36-month cycle for certain things. And now we're talking about a piece of technology that can give you 2 reads a day of what's going on. So you can constantly see what's changing underground by season, by temperature, by water, and what have you. So, once again, we're looking to bring technology into play to take out human error, to take out, the requirement for people to turn around and do something that isn't revenue generating, when most of our marketers are just looking to expand their business. So these are all good things. Hans, you have anything you want to add to that one?
Well, we need to answer Gary's question about how frequently you're supposed to check these tanks. They need to be checked when they get them installed, when they're installed. And then every 3rd year if it's a residential, and every year if it's a commercial tank. A constant monitoring is a good idea for those remote tanks at mountaintops, around the desert, or a long way from town. It saves you a lot of money, not having to send somebody out. If it's a summertime checkup, you have flash floods out west. You can't get to some sites. It could be real dry, and your readings might not be what you look for, what you like. Springtime, when the moisture's in the ground, is a better time. And these other questions I'm looking at, I'll check in later when you all have a Q&A session.
Hans, got a question for you, and I'm going to open this up to everybody on the panel. In your experience, is it possible, and have you run across instances where cathodic protection has failed in between the prescribed intervals of 36 months? Have you seen this before based on different scenarios, whether it's soil composition or chemicals in the ground?
Landscape guys can cut your wire when they're doing landscaping. That's an immediate loss of protection. If there's no cut wire, the anodes will decay over time, or the protection will drop off if it's real dry. So summertime is the worst time if you're trying to get a protected voltage. Springtime is your best. We run into cut wires more frequently than you would expect. Somebody digging in the ground to put a tree or a plant can cut it, and then you don't know it for 3 years.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to comment on this a little bit. So one thing about this technology is it is becoming more and more pervasive, and it has great value. We've talked a little bit about the fact that the cost savings of having this remote monitor as compared to sending a physical body out to do that is dramatic. And things do occur if it's 1 or 3 years, depending upon commercial or residential. And legally speaking, I'm just telling you this is how it works. You have a big enough loss and you're doing the physical monitoring every 1 or 3 years, and something fails in between that causes a catastrophic event. The party that is suing us is going to say, why didn't you use this technology to make sure that this problem didn't occur? I get it, you did it 1 or every 3 years, but had you used this technology, we wouldn't be here today. And being proactive and avoiding it is really where we all want to be. It's the hardest thing to be hypervigilant, but catastrophic losses are the nature of our work. And this gives us an opportunity to avoid that catastrophic event.
Yeah. You touched on a good point there, John. We're talking about hypervigilance. We're talking about being able to see more information. And we're living in a time where real-time data we see it everywhere else in all walks of life. We don't buy stocks on outdated information. We don't buy homes on outdated information. So obviously having more up-to-date information allows us to make better decisions, not only as marketers, but as vendors and so on and so forth. So this should be no different from that perspective.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I might add that trenching in sprinkler systems could inadvertently nick a poly line to the house. Certainly it'll cut or grind on a coated steel or copper line. You don't always have a alarm for leaking gas at a house. You smell it.
Right.
That's been a bigger issue for me is the piping to the house. Your cathodic protection is good on tanks, but eventually it'll be required on piping if it's a metal pipe.
Hans, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen, from a landscaping perspective, I got this question once, in terms of fertilizing lawns, what have you, does that have any impact on the anode bag as well?
Oh, yeah. I've had a lot of fellas say that the ground's not corrosive when they install a tank. It could be dry, it could be rocky, and they don't buy the idea that you need an anode. But as soon as they leave, it could rain, and that changes the whole world. The water makes the ground corrosive if it's got a lot of salts in it. Fertilizer is full of ammonia, nitrogen, other ions that conduct electricity. Fertilizer is a huge cause of corrosive soils in a non-corrosive desert environment, for example. So you can't control the homeowner's desire to beautify around a dome or where the piping runs. Fertilizer and what I learned just last week is that the new homes in Oklahoma that have septic fields, septic systems, they're wanting to reuse the water that goes into your septic processing vault, and then they pump it back out onto the ground, the yard, as fertilized water, and they're just recycling water. And that's eating up the domes, the tank if it doesn't have a good coating. That's like the salty water that you have in the Phoenix area that Frank would be more familiar with. So septic water, wastewater is a big problem.
So really what it comes down to is, once again, being hyper vigilant. You can't control what the customer is doing. So if you have a solution that allows you to see what's going on in a day-to-day basis, that will then put the marketer more at ease, obviously, when things like this happen, and they can actually be ahead of the game is what you're saying. So technology is a great equalizer from that standpoint.
You can see a change in current output, voltage readings from when there's no irrigation water or recycled wastewater. You can see it on your constant monitoring instruments.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you guys for that. Let's go ahead and we're going to move to question 3 now. So question 3, can you share real world examples of how proper cathodic protection has led to significant insurance savings or risk reduction? How do insurance and legal firms view cathodic protection and compliance in relation to cost and safety? I'm going to throw this one to Lauren Frank first. Lauren Frank, please.
Well, like I said before, just having the technology in place and eliminating some of the human error there is definitely going to help when an underwriter is looking at your account to come up with what your premium is. The more fail-safe that you have in place, the better off you're going to be. The loss control departments will come out after we put your insurance in place, and we'll walk you through all of these things. And so being able to have documentation available to take the human error out of it is huge. And we've heard from our carriers that in general the propane industry is not sophisticated in their record keeping, and things like this, John, I'm sure you can attest. Having a report that comes out of one of these systems is going to be a whole lot better than somebody scrawling some notes on the back of their lunch receipt, while they're out doing a test. So, I mean, it's amazing what this is going to do for the industry.
The problem has been over the years that some of the insurance companies don't have loss control that are going to go out and within that first 60-day period and inspect what the propane company is doing. Are you following the rules? And we have seen this with the insurance companies that have backed out. Recently, Travelers stopped writing insurance for propane. There are several other companies that have just stopped, such as the Philadelphia. We were instrumental in 2011 and 2012 to try to put Philadelphia into writing propane and fuel distributors. And my response to them is if you do it, you need to know who your insurance agent is, because some of these folks that are writing the insurance don't know what cathodic protection is. They don't know all the rules and regulations that this industry has. And therefore, they're getting an account. Yes, they are, but the account is not doing what they need to be doing to meet the recommendations and the rules and regulations. We have found it, and I had talked to Rod Jones at AmeriGas, who does training for them all over the United States. And Rod was telling me about how many people that they train to deliver the propane walk away because they don't want to learn this. Well, man, I'll tell you, when it comes to cathodic protection, everybody down the line, including the account manager that the insurance company is using, your insurance agent, they need to know this. The agent needs to know this. And they need to be able to be members of the NPGA and of the state associations, because that's the only place they're going to learn it if they're not with a carrier that has a active loss control company.
Right. Lauren, Frank, and even John, what are you guys hearing? I mean, my experience is in most industries, regulation and legislation is pushed a lot of times by the insurance industry as a whole. They're managing the risk for whatever it is. What are you guys hearing, or what do you think is going to be happening over the next couple of years in light of knowing that, we're going to have some more instances ahead of us before things get better? We've seen stuff happen in the past, as John has shown us. There's many others. Where do you guys think things are going, or what are you hearing?
This situation is critical. We had a situation in looking at it. We were dealing with a propane and a company over in New Mexico, and they were complaining about the cost of insurance. And I was I told her, I gave her a couple of examples of some really huge jury awards to people that shouldn't have gotten anything. Well, the next day she sent me a clipping out of the local newspaper that a lady that had fallen in a restaurant parking lot, just fallen, stepped into a, let's call it a pothole a little bit. She fell, bruised her knees, bruised her hands from falling on the asphalt. She received $31 million award from the jury because of the fact that the restaurant owner had money and they didn't. We had a situation with a tractor trailer that was on a state highway, and a drunk driver crossing the state highway that had uncontrolled lights, but there was stop signs and rumble strips on the side street. That drunk driver had a passenger in the car. We were completely innocent. We were doing what we're doing, driving down the highway. That drunk hit the rear axle on the tractor trailer, flipped it over, and guess what? The guy died that was drunk, but the man that was riding in there, because he was innocent, he was just riding, got $4.5 million. This is without getting ourselves in order. When I say the industry, in order, we're going to be faced with these huge catastrophic claims.
Well, let me comment on the legislation part of it.
Please, Josh.
So
I believe we've got to be looking toward the legislation, and it's going to be worse in the United States over the next year or two with the rising cost of things and some changes. But these claims
typically what happens in industry, if there's a catastrophic event like the Falk explosion that we had in 2006, often those type of events trigger legislation because of the public outcry. And the saving grace for our industry is that at that time, PERC, along with NPGA, came out with a protocol to deal with cathodic protection. In other words, if the industry is not going to fill that void, legislation is going to do that. And typically that legislation is often done in a vacuum of not understanding industry. It can often be draconian or difficult to apply. So our ability to be proactive is important. But I want to talk about my experience of what happens where we have issues. And the most difficult thing, as we talked about, is being proactive. Cost savings on insurance might be one thing over time. If you have a good track record, your premiums typically come down. But the other issue we talked about is if you have a big loss, you can lose your insurance, and often smaller mom and pops can go out of business or pay a substantial amount of money or sell out to a larger company. But excuses that I've heard are, look, it's not I don't own that tank. That's a customer-owned tank. Well, you have to take proactive steps to say, do you have cathodic protection? Are you doing that annually? If I'm going to fill this tank, I need you to have this remote monitoring, because once a year or 3 times a year is not enough, because it's just like doing a leak check. The day you do a leak check, okay, it doesn't leak, but something can happen the next day that can cause a leak. And so during that window of time where you aren't going and inspecting, an explosion can occur. Monitoring saves you and protects you for the customer-owned tank. The other thing is, how do they keep track of their records? They keep it by customer. Yep. Well, unless I go out and deliver it to that tank and I'm a delivery person looking to do cathodic protection, that's going to fall through the cracks. Because you might have 2,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 customers. And your reliance is that I will go to each customer file and determine that they have cathodic protection that I need to check? Or do you have a master list that's in the computer that you can check? And is everyone who's trained to do that? So the idea that, well, I don't have time to do it because it's an expense and the customer won't pay for it. Tank monitoring avoids that cost. And you should pass that cost through the customer regardless. but there are a limited number of people for most of these shops, and to have someone go out and doing cathodic protection on a regular basis is a huge expense. The tank monitor saves you that expense. So those are some of the issues that I see. And the most difficult thing is being proactive about it. So look, I haven't had a problem in 20 years. Where you got 20 tanks that are buried that are hidden dangers. And over 20 years, they will begin to, the cathodic protection will fail. Traffic laws. And unfortunately, I will get involved.
Right. So I'm just going to throw this out before we move to the next question. A quick yes or no. Do we think that on the state level and the federal level, we're going to see legislation over the next couple of years making things tighter and holding people more accountable? And could we see something where it's moving to more of a yearly basis like we do, John talked about and Hans talked about on commercial tanks for the residential tanks? Do we see the industry going in that direction? And what is that confidence level like?
I don't have a sense right now that legislation will happen, but as I say, it only takes one catastrophic event for that to occur.
So that will trigger. Yeah,
ahead,
that
Lauren.
would definitely trigger for sure. I mean, it's inevitable.
Right. We hear the conversations on the state level in the association. So we starting to hear that, more of it, like, hey, what can we do? How are we going to do it? And who's going to, be doing the check-in in the audience? So I think it's the conversation's just really beginning, honestly. Okay, let's go ahead and let's move to our next question. So question number 4, how do the PERC guidelines impact the maintenance and monitoring of underground tanks? And do you think there will be changes such as to frequency of testing down to a 12-month? So Hans, I know you've been, you worked with PERC from day one on writing a lot of the stuff on the original guidelines. Let me start with you. What do you think?
It doesn't take but a couple of minutes to take readings on a tank. It's not a big deal. The delivery driver can do that. Going back to some of these questions I'm seeing on the sidebar here, Liz asked about what if the owner of a tank doesn't want to put an anode on or protect it? My first reaction is, well, what's the house worth that the owner's living in? It's probably his biggest single investment. That's a good motivation to protect the tank. If the propane supplier has a customer that refuses to protect their tank, do they have some exposure on a liability issue if there is a leak from a tank or a pipe? More often pipes than tanks. The logic for me is maybe the propane supplier put the anode on or anodes at their expense because it's insurance for the propane supplier. The frequency annual makes a lot of sense. The time of year, there was a question on what time of year is moisture a factor. Your anodes give out more current when they're wet or moist. So that's why springtime is a good time because you get the best protection. If everything dries up to dry dust in the summer, there's no corrosion going on the tank because of the lack of moisture. There were a couple other questions that
I'd love to go back though to more of the guidelines, right? Like I know, the guidelines were written quite some time ago. Do you think we're going to see some new guidelines in the near future?
All right. NFPA was the driving force on what we have in the industry now as far as codes. The piping is evolving. The question, do you protect the piping? If it's bare copper, it's not easy. Bare copper is tough, but they have the same criteria as steel pipe and the same criteria as a steel tank. So you probably won't have a change in the codes until someone famous has a leak that blows, that causes a fire at their home. It makes national news. That's when these things happen. I don't know about the TNS committee, what they've been discussing, or the PERC testing CTEP program, where they place emphasis. I plan to be advocating taping those risers because that's a real problem for these folks in Oklahoma where the recycled wastewater is as corrosive as saline water down in the Phoenix area. So it's slow to evolve, but I give the propane industry a lot of credit for what they have done since I started preaching this gospel back in 1999. The gasoline industry ignored the problem, and they have the federal government and state governments threatening fines if they don't do their best practices and protect what they have that stores fuel.
Okay.
Well, let me comment to this on this a little bit if I can, Hans and
Please, John.
So the guidelines that are provided by NPGA are minimum standards. And
Yes.
in a legal setting, you can always do more than the minimum. So that's one thing. Over time, technology will, my experience is, becomes folded into what the standards are. But more importantly, I think this is really the overarching theme that I think we're all talking about is that what can we do to avoid risk? And your ability to avoid risk is driven by your ability to control. The more control you have, the better ability you have to impact the reduction of risk. The less control you have, the less ability you have to reduce risk. And I analogize it to doing leak checks following an out of gas situation or interruption of service. Since 1997, everyone on this call is aware that you only have to do a leak check following an interruption of service out of gas. However, I advocate, as do insurance companies, and Frank and Laura can speak to this, that you still go in and light appliances, you look for uncapped lines, you look for manual shutoff valves. Why? Because it avoids risk. And even if you only get 80% of the people where they allow you to come in and light appliances and turn off gas, you're reducing 80% of your risk. Analogizing that to cathodic protection, if you do things that allow you to be more proactive, where you can eliminate virtually all of your risk on a regular basis by doing tank monitoring, you're reducing your risk. You're reducing that 1 in a million chances that you'll have an explosion that will destroy your business, ruin your reputation, cause your premiums to go through the roof, or you can't get insurance and you have to sell to somebody else. So when we're talking about this, we're asking you to consider a very safe alternative that you can pass the cost on to a customer that has substantial savings to you in terms of risk, in terms of being able to go to sleep at night and being able to continue in your business to keep your people safe. And those are all reasons why I think it's not just minimum, it's what we can do to avoid risk.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Thank you, Hans. So that brings us to the end of our questions here. I do want to let everybody know on the call that we'll be doing this at NPGA. We're going to have the same panel here, plus a representative from PERC. So please come and join us. It'll be 8 a.m. on April 15th in room W201. Seating is limited, and we are providing a light breakfast with that. So please go ahead and register if you're going to join us. This will be a more intimate conversation, more one-on-one, more questions and answers going on, and really getting into the guts of this. So we hope to look forward to seeing you there. By being a participant in today's call, you will get an invite for this automatically. So do not worry about whether you got the QR code or the link here on the screen. Okay. With that said, let's go ahead and we're going to do a couple questions here. So I'm just going to go here and take the first one here. What is the Mopeka solution and what does it measure and how often? So good question. So we have the world's first cathodic monitor. There's nothing else on the market like it. What this will do is this will turn around and do the voltage check that you would normally do, along with giving you a moisture reading. In addition, we will also show current that is on the tank. To one of Hans' points earlier when we talked about when do people do their testing, a lot of time they do it in the summer because that's when it's slowest. But when the ground is driest, that's when it's not getting really attacked because there's low moisture in the ground. What our unit allows you to do is to sit back, and this unit will take readings twice a day and bring them right into your dashboard. So you always have it at hand and you can see when things are changing very quickly. Okay, so this allows you not to have to do manual testing, and you can just go ahead and monitor that. Let's look here. Where is the solution available and from? So the solution is available from us. Is also available from any of our distributors. You can go on our website and you can go to our distributor page and see the distributors there. You're also able to purchase this through Metza. OE already on the tank, mounted and ready to go. And you can also get it from our partner over at Quality Steel. Quality Tank, excuse me. Let's go here. Let's take this question. How are people handling customer-owned tanks? If a cathodic test fails and the customer is refusing to address it, what is the panel's approach? So who wants to go ahead and answer that one real quick for everybody?
Well, that was Liz, and I've already answered that one.
Well, I think we have kind of answered that. Whereas that,
yeah, let's just be a little bit clearer about it, though, very succinctly. What is the market responsible for, and what is the homeowner responsible for?
well, if you're filling a tank that is customer owned and they will not do cathodic protection, and you'll have some liability. If there's an explosion, you will be sued. And my recommendation is you either require that they have a tank monitor, or you refuse to fill that tank because it's unsafe.
How about a form saying that I decline cathodic protection on my home tank that I own? That might help the insurance industry.
Of course, nobody should.
You should document why you're not filling it,
regardless. Then.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and take one more here. We have about 8 underground tanks. How often are they supposed to be checked? So I think we kind of touched on that a little bit where we said, correct me if I'm wrong, the commercial tanks are yearly, and the residential tanks, after it's been put in the ground, it's per code 18 months and then every 36 months thereafter, correct?
Correct. Why don't the marketers have a policy within their own company to have their delivery truck drivers take a reading, at least one, when they're there at the site, take a reading every time they fill the tank up. They can keep that data in their own database. And we're talking minimum standards with the PERC and NFPA rules. Why not every time they deliver fuel, take a reading while they're there? That's the best practice.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and take one more question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I said that's a great idea.
Can we talk? Richard Friedenberg is very involved with cathodic protection in the propane industry. He's asked, why don't we make a proposal to increase the frequency? Well, that's what we could. If it makes the world safer, that's a good idea. Coding is a big issue for me. We've talked about that. I have to answer one more question about why doesn't the current protect the riser inside the dome or the shroud? For all those fellas out there and gals, picture, if you could, the current that flows from an anode as light and your anodes are light bulbs, your goal is to illuminate the tanks. And inside that shroud, the current cannot get through the plastic or steel shroud that surrounds that riser. And current cannot go through air. So that's why it corrodes inside the riser. And just because it's hooked up in the riser, the anode wire, that's like a light switch to that anode. It doesn't matter where the light switch is, it's where the anode is. So hooking up in the riser doesn't protect the riser.
Thank you for that, Hans. So I think we're gonna stop here from questions. We have another poll question coming up here, so I'm going to hand it back to Brian.
Thanks, Kevin. Our next poll question, would you like to learn more about the Mopeka Cathodic Sentinel solution to monitor your cathodic protection? And we're going to give about 30 seconds to have this answered. We're not going to show the results on this, but just wanted to get some feedback from our audience to see if they are interested in the Mopeka solution.
And while we're doing that, what we're going to do on our side here, Brian, is we're going to do a wrap up here. I want to throw to everybody and give them 30 seconds at max to give people, what you think the closing remarks should be from your perspective and what you think key takeaways are. And I'm going to go ahead and start with John, if that's okay. John?
Absolutely. As everybody knows, I get involved when there's claims and lawsuits, and so I see all the risk. But if you're here and you're on this call, you're trying to learn more about cathodic protection and the technology that is available. This has been eye-opening for me to listen to Hans and the insurance people here and Kevin with regard to this technology. And the trick here is to act on ideas that you have now about things that you could do to be more safe. Thinking about it, talking to your colleagues about it is not enough. You should act on this and find reasons to move forward with considering this technology and installing it.
Perfect. Lauren?
I think proactivity is the name of the game here. Don't wait for something to happen. Get ahead of it. Protect yourself. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Frank?
And I think that, again, the fact that you have something that you can show a court, that you can show the owner, you have something that is in writing, you have it all right there. This is certainly one of the answers that these folks could easily take and put in play, which is going to save them in the future. And we are always concerned about our insureds. As a company, we are concerned. We're concerned, like when the cameras became available to put in vehicles. We push this kind of stuff. We don't sell it, but we see the value, and I see the value in this equipment in cathodic protection.
Thank you. Hans?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get an answer for Carl Bisson. I was looking through my NFPA 58 code book. You can read it with my camera. I know that impress current systems need to be checked annually, and that may be what I'm thinking of when it comes to commercial tanks being tested annually. But impress current systems are treated differently than galvanic anode systems. So I'm still looking to answer Carl's question. Sorry about that, guys.
What are your final thoughts for people in terms of your closing remarks and what you think people should be taking away from this? Well,
the state associations have regular conventions. We have the national coming up. You'll be there in Charlotte. So will I, and Frank and Lauren and John. I don't know if you'll be there, but we all have telephones. We have email addresses. If somebody has a question, contact us. That's what we are here to do. At my age, I've been doing this for 40 years. in the propane business, and then longer than that on pipelines. Take advantage of free advice if you are bothered by the rules or the regs or customer complaints, customer reluctance. We're happy to help you guys keep your businesses prosperous and safe.
Perfect. I'm just going to say this. One, I want to thank all our panelists for joining us today. I thought this was a great discussion, a lot of good information. And then for the people here on the webinar, I think my final thoughts are things are going to get tougher. I think from an industry perspective, we hear about insurance struggles, we're hearing about premiums, we're hearing about exposure and risk. It's not going to get easier. And like most things in our industry, we're looking to technology as a solution. So, think about this when you replay this whole webinar back in your head. We will be at the MPGA, we'll be at booth 204. So please stop by. We'd love to see you and engage with you more one-on-one. And reminder that we do have that post discussion at 8 a.m. on April 15th at the MPGA, where you'll be able to engage with all the panelists here, plus PERC and us, in a little bit more intimate setting. But I think right now, my last thing is hypervigilance. I'm going to steal Lauren's words there, and really take a look and focus at what your exposure is going forward. Okay. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for a great presentation today. Now I'm going to wrap up the live event. Thank you for attending the Mastering Cathodic Protection Expert Guidance to Ensure Compliance and Protect Underground Tanks. It's brought to you by LP Gas Magazine and our sponsor of the event, Mopeka. A recording of this webinar and our other upcoming webinars from LP Gas will be posted to lpgasmagazine.com/.